All right. Hi there. Welcome to My Other's Keeper. I am really excited to have today's guest, and this is Don Campbell. He is one of my lovely dear friends that I used to work with, and I still am very pleased to be able to call him a friend. So, welcome, Don.
Thank you, Kim. I'm very pleased to call you a friend.
So, we are here to talk about your writing. Now, that's not how we first met each other. We first met each other in a job interview. Do you remember that?
Oh, yes. I was on the hiring.
Yes, you're on the hiring committee when I was applying for
Yes.
a job where you worked.
I'd
Yep.
forgotten that. Yes.
Yes. And you hired me because I was the only applicant who ever made you laugh.
Well, that was a big plus because that's so important for a teacher, right?
It is. It really is. Yes. So, Don, tell us what you do on a regular basis.
Okay. Well, my day job, which is a long day, but
Mhm.
is teaching English as a second language or additional language at the Saskatoon Open Door Society. I teach an afternoon class and a different morning class Monday to Friday. And then my other things that I do are writing. These days, mostly poetry and short stories, and mostly poetry these days. But in the past, a lot of plays, and I've had some of them performed and some chosen for festivals and different things. And I used to do journalism in a seems like a previous lifetime. I did work freelance, which people often think freelance means you don't get paid. I was freelance with CBC Radio, so I did get paid. It
Nice.
just meant I wasn't a regular employee. And I did arts reporting and theater reviews for CBC Saskatchewan, and I did also arts reporting for CBC National Radio
Oh,
for
wow.
things based in Saskatoon. I also love travel. I love walking beside the river. I love taking photos, music, art,
But do you
all,
like pina coladas
and getting caught in the rain.
and getting caught in the rain? Nope.
Not terribly fond of either of them, but
Okay. Okay. You're
thank you
just
for
talking about
that.
walking.
Thank you for that reference that gives away the fact that we're not millennials.
No, we're not. No, we are not. Yeah,
But
no,
you'll always be younger than me. Just remember that.
I will always be younger than you, but I am catching up, let me tell you.
I don't think
The
it works.
percentage is getting closer and closer.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I'm 64 and I'm the youngest of six, five siblings. And so
Wow.
they still say I'm the baby of the family. And they say no matter how old you get, you'll always be the baby of the family. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the youngest of our family, and since we found our sister Tanya, I'm still the youngest.
wow.
Yep. So it's kind of weird. Like we're all in our 50s, but my goodness, it doesn't feel like that. That's for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah. So we're here to talk about your authoring work. So tell us how many uh you said you don't have any books when we were discussing a few minutes ago, but you have lots of articles, you have lots of poetry, you have lots of stories. In how many different publications have you contributed?
Oh, that's a good question. So I have short stories or other forms of prose pieces and poetry
Mhm.
in anthologies in Canada, the US, and the UK, in print anthologies. But I also have some that are in published online. And I had one that was a recording of me doing it was published on the Saskatoon Public Library website. Um,
Cool.
and I was paid for it, which was nice, because not all writing gigs pay. Um,
No,
and I mean, not that I'm in it for the money, but it does give you help give a sense of validation. Um,
absolutely.
yes, so if I were, I can't really say offhand right now because I'm thinking about the online and the print and the, um, and in the past, I wrote theater reviews for New West Review magazine in Western Canada, which is now defunct, unfortunately. And I've written for various other things. So um, a lot of places.
Okay. Something else that you're known for, but in the ESL world, you've had quite a few of your lesson plans used as in the top 100 of a certain lesson plan.
Oh yes, quick worksheets.
Yes.
.net. No, I don't work for them, and I'm not, getting any money for saying them. Yes. So
No.
another of my coworkers and I,
Mhm.
Dawn, as we call her,
Mhm.
Lady Dawn, and me, Sir Dawn, where you was a running joke for a long time. Anyway, she has published a lot. So when you create worksheets there, they encourage you, if you want to share them, and then others can edit them and make their own versions and use them if they want. And so she has done that a lot, and I've done it a fair amount, and both of us have had quite a few of them ending up being quite popular there. So that feels good too.
Yeah, that's for sure. It's nice when you get to have a little bit of a claim, even if it's just for the bragging rights, you know. But
Well, it's
money
nice
is
to know that
always
somebody out there finds something you created useful, and they
absolutely.
and the great thing is, like I said, on the website they use it as a template, and then they can make whatever changes they want, which is fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. That is nice that you give them a good springboard.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
lessons are so individual, you know, per class, per person in class and such too yet. So, yeah. So, let's get back to your other work, your prose and poetry. Now, which do you prefer? Poetry, prose, playwright,
Oh,
the three
I love.
P's.
I love all of them. For the past while, I've been focusing almost exclusively on poetry. But for many years, it was almost all playwriting. And long ago, it was kind of poetry and short stories. And, so it depends on what phase of my life I'm in. A lot of it has to do with the pandemic. So
Mm,
I stepped away from writing plays when it started because theater wasn't happening.
sure.
And so I decided to go back to focusing on short stories and poetry, which I had done before. And
Mhm.
actually, the pandemic turned out to be the best thing that's ever happened to my writing.
How so?
I thought you might ask.
Do tell.
Okay, so like a month after or so after the pandemic was declared internationally, a friend of mine, noted author and Governor General's Award winner for young adult literature, Arthur G. Slade, on his Facebook page, he mentioned a online writers conference, which was going to be free. And so I attended. And through that, I found out about an organization called Wordsmith Writing Coaches, which is based in LA. So I started attending some of their online writing sessions and ended up becoming very involved with it, and then ended up being one of the people who could run the sessions.
Oh, wow.
Basically, they're all in LA or nearby, well, occasionally some from other parts of the States, and then me in Saskatoon. And so I'm still involved with it. And this Sunday, we're doing every month, the last Sunday of the month, we have something called Slake, Slake. And in advance, we submit a piece of our writing and it gets sent out to all the members. And then we meet for a couple of hours on Zoom and we give each other feedback about it. And it's really helpful.
That
And
sounds excellent.
yeah, and then we have a couple of times a week, a couple of evenings a week, you can come and write at the same time, but you're not reading each other's writing. You give
Mm.
what your goal is for that session, and then you mute and you work on it, and then you report back in how it went and be supportive to each other. I haven't been going to that as much recently because of the time difference of LA and all that kind of stuff. And also because I discovered, so I'm starting to get back to it more now. I'm going to be happy when the time change happens. So there'll only be 1 hour time difference. And mornings I found much better than evenings now for me often. So I found something called the London Writers Salon, and they have a similar type of writing at the same time. But there's a huge number of people, like often over 100. So you don't get to talk to everybody, but there is a little bit of interaction. And they have them in the morning. So I've done some of those. And anyway, so the LA based group has been wonderful. And also with the pandemic, 2 of the writers in residence at the Saskatoon Public Library didn't end up being able to come to Saskatoon. So Danny Ramadan is from Vancouver, was in Vancouver, didn't get to come here because of the pandemic, but he did everything online, and he had Zoom meetings with people and email back and forth and feedback. And he was incredibly supportive of my writing. And at that time, I was focusing mostly on short stories, which he also does. And so it was amazing, the getting feedback back and forth with him. And he went really above and beyond with me. And it was absolutely wonderful. And also I was the first person he asked to be one of the readers in a public salon thing he did on the library's website. And then it was archived there, at least for a while. And I got paid for it, which is nice. And he also invited me to be one of the people to read my work at his farewell event on Zoom when his tenure ended. And I got paid for that too.
Nice.
Not that money's the most important thing, but there's a validation of it, right?
Exactly.
Writers have no money. It's just the honor, So money's a nice bonus. And then it's like, the universe knew my timing, because then I went back to focusing more on poetry for a while, and Di Brandt came along. And oh my God, she is wonderful. She's a Winnipeg poet. I recommend her work highly. When she was writer in residence, she, again, couldn't come to Saskatoon because of the pandemic, and was based in Winnipeg. And I attended a series of poetry workshops that she had. And she gave us reading to do every week and homework to do every week. And we shared our poems we were working on. And actually, at least 3 of the things that I started during her poetry workshops and then got feedback on from my LA group and different things, at least 3 of them ended up getting published, and it was just astounding. She was so wonderful. It was like a poetry masterclass. I learned so much. And I've attended lots of online writing conferences with, because so much is on Zoom, et cetera now. And it's been absolutely wonderful. And I joined the Canada Writes Facebook group, and also Off Topic Publishing, which is a Canadian, their Facebook group, and I ended up getting published in one of their anthologies. And another Facebook group I belong to that's really, really great and does great workshops is called Feel Right Again. WRITE, Feel Right Again. And it's partly about self-care for the writer. So, the pandemic has been horrible, of course. For me, for writing, it's been absolutely wonderful. And I've made a huge breakthrough, particularly in my poetry, I believe. And I'm not saying, I'm better than anyone else, but I'm a lot better than I used to be. And I'm writing on a different level than I used to be able to. And I got a poem chosen and published in a chapbook, which means like a small little book with poems by 15 writers by the League of Canadian Poets, which was quite an honor. And then after I had enough publications in various places, sent them 10 pages of my writing to look at, and got a letter of reference from a current member of League of Canadian Poets. I was accepted. as a member, as an associate member. To be a full member, you need to have had a book published. But as an associate member, there's lots of services they have, and I've participated in open mic events they have, and various things. And yeah, so anyway, I guess partly because I've had so much positive feedback about my recent poetry. I mean, short stories and stuff too, but and I, like I said, I feel like have made a huge breakthrough in it. That's mostly why I've been focusing on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the poetry. I've heard a little bit of your poetry, not a lot, but I've heard a little bit, and you're powerful.
Oh,
I
thank you.
love the way that you create pictures, and just the tone and all of that in your work is just beautiful. Would you mind reading something for us?
Oh, writers never like to read something they wrote. So if it's okay, I'd like to read two short things back to back because they kind of connect in a way. Okay?
Sure.
So this is the chapbook from the League of Canadian Poets. They have a series of chapbooks. And this one is called On the Storm, in the Struggle, Writers and Survival. And so my poem was chosen to be last. And of course, being a person who tends to think I'm not good enough a lot of the time, I thought, well, why did they put me last? Maybe they didn't really like it. And then when I looked at the anthology and I remembered that the title was On the Storm, in the Struggle, and the subtitle, Writers and Survival, it's absolutely perfect that they put mine last. And I was so thrilled. So this one is called Some Days. On a good day, it doesn't show. I walk down the street like everyone else, remember to take my mask, straighten my back, raise my head, pretend to matter. Other days, I look for sidewalk cracks I've memorized, for the longest shadows of tree branches, my shoulders hunched, feet barely lifting from the pavement. Some days I sit by my kitchen window, watch people walk by, heads up, shoulders back, feet claiming the sidewalk, eyes claiming the sky. Some days I close the bedroom blinds, keep out the sun and its empty promises. On bad days, I calculate milligrams and kilograms, medicine and flesh. How much is too much? How much would I need? I made it through today. Tomorrow's weather forecast, cloudy with brief sunny periods. Perfect.
That sounds lovely. Oh, I don't know why, but I've got goosebumps.
Thank you.
That's excellent.
And the other one, which kind of connects in a way, because this poem was related to about a year into the pandemic, I had severe depression and anxiety, and it all came to a head. And anyway, things are quite a bit better now. But I was absolutely thrilled because of that, and that I had something chosen for the 2023 Canadian Mental Health Association's Saskatchewan Division fundraiser calendar. So I can now say I'm a calendar boy. It's the only time I'm going to be a calendar boy, trust me. I'm Mr. July. And it was also art by, so writers from Saskatchewan and art from Saskatchewan people. And so I love the tractor and, old farm, because I grew up on a farm.
Yeah.
That was chosen to go with mine.
The Little Duck.
Yes, by Val Morehart. She's from Yorkton.
Okay.
So anyway, and I told you about walking by the river. So this poem and the river, the South Saskatchewan River, has been great for my mental health. And not traveling, I haven't been out of the province since 2018, not just because of the pandemic, but lots of things, and was hoping to do a lot of traveling in 2020, etc. Anyway, so staying in one place and coming back to the river for many, many walks and seeing it in different seasons and different lights and different times of day has really taught me to look for beauty. And it's helped my writing a lot. And my writing tends to be very visual, and
Mhm.
partly because of my love of photography, but also there my love as a playwright. There's a lot of people doing things in my poetry. It's not just
Mhm.
abstract. It's not abstract, really. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so long introduction for a short poem.
Okay.
It's called "The River's Gifts." Some days the river is a mirror. Its dreams are white clouds above and below me, till it wakes itself with the slap of a beaver tail. Some days the river is a painter, each wave a brushstroke of blue, creamy white, or 100 shifting shades I have no name for. Yesterday I tossed a stick, imagined a dog downstream, find it, splash to give the treasure to a boy who looked like me. Every day the river teaches me to look for dancing light, to see that all things change, and trust in beauty yet to come.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
I see your photographs regularly on Facebook,
Yes.
and the photos that you take are just evocative of the type of poetry you do, right?
Yes.
It's light and shadows and changing changing weather, changing seasons.
And
You love the
it's very
river.
physical. My poetry tends to be very,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, it's wonderful. Oh, that's so
Thank
great.
you.
Okay. So now I want to pick your brain.
Uh-oh. First, you need to find it. Would you like a magnifying glass?
Um, no, if somebody wants to get into writing, what would you suggest besides simply put a pen to paper and write words?
Uh, Finding a writer's group
Mhm.
is really, really helpful. Um,
Okay.
and it can be a group, like I said, this wordsmith writing coaches, it can be the times that we do where we're just writing at the same time, and we're
Mhm.
talking about what our goals are and how it went, whether it went well or not, and that, but we're not actually showing each other that current writing. And that can be in person, or that can be online on Zoom, which is what we do and so many people do now. It can
Right.
also be a group where you give each other feedback like we do once a month, and a lot of groups do both. And there's a lot of writing groups all over the country and internationally. And basically, Google your city and about writing groups. Um, and public libraries often have writing workshops. Saskatoon Public Library does, for example. That's
Mhm.
really useful. And if you can go to online workshops, those are great. Um, so read a lot. Read and read and read some more, because you'll learn so much from reading others writing. And it doesn't have to be all, classic writers that are famous or whatever. You can read all sorts of things, and you can learn from things that you don't like. You can learn from things that you like. You can see techniques that you hadn't thought about before, see what possibilities there are.
Yeah.
And definitely the most important thing is to write.
Yeah.
And you don't have to show it to anybody,
Mhm.
for a certain time or ever if you don't want to, because the
Mhm.
writing is not just to be seen by others or to be published. The writing, I think, and anyone who writes, I think, will say this, is mostly for you.
Yeah.
Um, but of course, if you can find readers, that's absolutely wonderful. And some people don't want them, and that's okay. Um, I want them. Some
Mhm.
things I don't want them for, and some things I certainly do. And my God, getting stuff published is tough because there's so many submissions happening, and a lot of time. And that's another thing. Being part of several Facebook writers groups, they're really supportive of each other, saying, I got 3 more submissions, I got rejections from whatever, and encouraging each other. And it your poem or story or whatever or book may be absolutely great, but may not be what they're looking for at this time. Maybe they just published something similar to it, or they're about to publish something similar to it, or thematically it doesn't fit the issue of the literary magazine they're going to publish, or all sorts of things. And so I've had some rejections that my first thought was, oh, I was rejected. But like Grain magazine, which is published out of Saskatchewan, literary magazine, I had a short story that when Danny Ramadan was the writer in residence at the Saskatchewan Public Library, that's the one that he paid me to have put on the library website. And I submitted it. He said I should submit it to literary journals and that. And it made it to their final round, for selections for that issue. But they said, sorry, but they said, but remember that very few people make it to the final round, and Absolutely. That it was a very strong story. So you got to take the positives and not negate that. Like in life, so many of us, there's one negative thing and 3 positive things, and of course, what are we going to remember?
That's right.
And, so again, join some Facebook writing groups where you're not ones where you're not giving each other feedback about your writing. Sometimes you can arrange like direct message to email someone if they're interested or whatever. But just posting about what's going on with your writing, and you'll find so many people are in the same boat as you, and you can learn from each other's experience. You can console each other, celebrate each other when you're published. Or when you finish something, whether or not you're going to send it for publication, or when you got a nice rejection email, because some of them are very nice and most of them are kind of generic. But
the PFOs.
Yeah. So, so that's a few things. But of course, the most important thing is to write, and not to have that internal editor at the back of your head too early on in the process. When you're working on a first draft, a lot of writers refer to it as the garbage draft, or something to do with bodily solid functions that I won't mention draft, because it's going to be horrible. You just have to get it out. So you get the ideas out and possibilities of where you can go. You need the messy clay before you can make the beautiful sculpture or pot or whatever, right? And so many people, including me, even though I've got lots of writing training and lots of writing experience, I still find myself editing myself during my first draft and going, try to get it out as much as you can, whether it seems good or not. It's probably not going to be good at the beginning, but that sense of accomplishment of finishing the first draft will definitely give you a boost. Then unless you really have a time deadline, set it aside for a while, come back to it, then start the editing, work on a new draft, then set it aside again. And then, so some things that I've ended up having published, or people have said are publishable, but they just can't publish it at that particular time, have gone through many, many drafts. And each time, if I had the time, I set it aside. I just finished doing revisions to a poem that I had gotten feedback from the LA group in 2020. And I hadn't looked at it really since then. Well, briefly maybe. And I was looking for stuff to work on for revision. And I am so much a better writer and better poet than I was in July 2020. And so I made some revisions in that, and it's so much stronger. And now I'm submitting it again to the LA group for our this week Sunday meeting, because you can resubmit things, especially if you've made major revisions, which I have. And they have been so supportive. The main person who runs Wordsmith Writing Coaches, Nick Nelson, he has edited many books, including books of poetry. And he absolutely loves my poetry and raves about it. And, and so and he's not just being nice. He gives constructive criticism, and so do the others in the group. And but it is just so wonderful to have that, you know.
Hmm. That is so wonderful. So when you talk about stronger writing, what sorts of things are you looking at for stronger versus weaker? Um, yeah, how would you know that something is stronger?
Um, well, technically speaking, if I'm thinking about prose, like short stories and other forms of prose, um, trying to get rid of as many adverbs as possible. Like, I hate you, she said angrily. Okay, so if she said, I hate you with an exclamation mark, do you need angrily? No. There's adverbitis. Adverbs tend to infect a lot of things. And also, people tack on often too many adjectives. And that also applies to poetry. Um, so, to any writer, I would say, especially not necessarily for playwriting, because it's dialogue, right? And I could talk a lot about playwriting, but that's not what I'm focusing on these days. Is the verb, a well chosen verb, can make a huge difference. They're active, they're direct. So if you have the right verb, you often don't need the adverb or the adjective, or as many adjectives. Of course, you use them sometimes, but um, um, so can I say the beginning of a poem that I'm working on now? Well, this is this poem, the one from 2020 that I've been revising, and going to get feedback on the current one. So in the current draft, it starts, um, lovers' shadows merge in a cafe corner, his breath a dance across her curls. Um, so his breath a dance across her curls. There isn't even a verb there. There's a noun, but the reader understands what the verb is. And merge, right? Their shadows merge. So I chose a very specific verb that is evocative and that tells you a lot. And across her curls, the across has a C in it, and curl starts with a C. So it's kind of an alliteration, you know, where you start with the same sound, like rubber baby buggy bumpers, baby buggy bumpers. But it's a subtle thing. It's not at the beginning across her curls, right? It's partway through the word. So one of the things that having studied poetry and workshops and feedback and whatever, is I'm finding the nuances much more when I'm revising. Still, my first drafts of poems are often not very good, obviously. Most people's aren't. But when I'm polishing, the it's almost a form of meditation, the getting the right words. And when you get them, something just clicks inside of you and you get this little kind of thrill. And you may end up changing that later if something you think is so good now. But that sort of thrill of surprising yourself sometimes, where did that come from? Why did I suddenly think of that? Some of it's very logically planned out. Now, how can I accomplish this? But some of it just comes out of the depths of your subconscious or wherever. And to me, that's one of the most thrilling things about writing, and one of the reasons why it can be very rewarding in itself, the process. So to enjoy, I mean, sometimes writing can be a headache, obviously, when you're having a tough time. But enjoying the process when you have those breakthroughs and when it goes well, I think is really, really important. Oh, I can't actually hear you. Meanwhile, I'm enjoying the lovely weather we're having these days. I still can't hear you. Oh, yes, you're muted according to your name there. Beside your name, obviously. Ah, there you go.
Oh, there we go. Okay. I have a little mic, and I have two of them, and one of them died.
Oh, okay.
So yeah. So I need to charge that one. Alrighty, this should be better. Okay.
Maybe that's a sign that we should wrap up. Technology gods are telling us, yes.
So I'm sorry, I wasn't paying close attention as you were talking. I was too busy trying to find a mic.
Oh, I know. No, I was just saying that when you're really working on something, like really fine nuances of it, whether it's prose or poetry or a play or a song or whatever, when you get the right word or the right phrase or the right image, there's just such a thrill and an intake of breath, like, oh, and you may change it later, but sometimes you don't know where that comes from.
Right.
It probably wouldn't have come if you hadn't had the discipline of writing lots and whatever, and knowing that there'll be periods where you don't write much or write nothing, but trusting that you'll come back to it, I think is really important. So anyway, those thrilling moments when you're actually writing, doing the work, to me are the most important, whether or not something ends up getting published or whether it's done at a reading. That's one of the reasons why I love participating in open mic readings, both in person and online, is to be able to share my work, whether it's been published or not.
So the process in and of itself is a real joy for you.
Yes.
Oh, that's wonderful. That makes it so much more not successful. It makes it more sustaining to your soul, right?
It's like when I take photos, the process of taking the photo, like I said, is a form of meditation in a way, and the same thing with the writing too. And both of them teach me to see things much more carefully, look at them much more carefully, see things I would have missed before, appreciate beauty and nuances. And I'm repeating myself now. That's okay.
Well, no, but nuance. So for those of us who are not literary, what is nuance?
Well, it doesn't have to be in literature. It can be in anything, like the subtle gradations of something, right? Like there's a different nuance if I say, it's nice to see you, and it's so nice to see you, right? There's just a slight change there, but it makes so a nuance is just a very small detail that changes the feeling or the emotion of something. That's one of
so almost like the tone of voice would change.
That's part of it, yeah. Or as some people say, the fine tuning. The fine tuning of writing is working on the nuances. Yeah.
Okay.
Not the main plot of what's happening in the story or the play or the poem. I mean, some poems things aren't happening, but the exact wording and images that you're going to use to give the fine degree of detail, like in painting, the exact brush strokes.
I'm going to read something to you that I wasn't sure I was going to, but I'm going to. Where we are. There we go. All right. I have an idea for a book.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a trilogy. And the theme of the trilogy is choices. So how do choices change who you are, what you do, that sort of thing? And how do other people's choices also affect how things go? So this is just when you begin a story, when you begin a piece, if it has people, do you choose the storyline first, or do you choose your characters first, or how do you choose them differently?
Actually, in almost all of my creative writing, so short stories, poetry, or plays, I an image comes to me of somebody in a situation and what they're doing. And then I go, okay, now how could the person have gotten into that situation? Who could they be? And I start exploring it that way. So it's very much based, again, maybe that's why so much of my writing is physical and concrete, is I see it as an image. I start with an image, and then from that starts to come plot and characters and action. So
Okay. So
but
this is
different people start with different things,
right.
That tends to be what happens with me. And what I thought something was going to end up being, often it takes a completely different turn, which is fine. But I had that beginning, that got me interested and got me going. So
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. Like I said, I have an idea. I'm not sure that it will ever get written. I just don't know if it will. I always
yes,
get distracted by a pile of things. But I've written a character. Her name is Ruby Grace. Archie for short. It started out as RG, but someone in my class at school misspoke one day and it just stuck. So, like, that's just kind of how she introduced herself.
okay, that already has me interested.
Yeah, that's kind of, yeah. So I love it. Archie is more who I am. I have red hair, I drive an old car, and my best friends are Becky and her brother Ronnie. I was born at a very young age to a girl who was also, she was also very young. Anyway, and then it talks about who her mother was and how she ended up being adopted and that kind of stuff. So yeah, so basically when you start with your plot, you want something that grabs you, right?
Yes.
And you're very not plot driven, action driven, concrete. You were saying you're very concrete in your
Yes.
writing. How do you develop a style when it comes to writing?
Well, that's another thing especially about poetry, is that we talk about finding your voice, and not just in poetry, but in all sorts of writing, various sorts of creative writing. It doesn't mean that everything you write is going to be the same kind of style exactly, but finding an approach that sort of
Don't be John Grisham.
Yeah, you're being true to this is how I see situations, or
Right.
it's hard to explain. It's when you know that this word or this phrase or this scene is, I can feel it in my gut, right? It doesn't necessarily mean it came from your life,
Right.
but it has a connection deep inside you, and it isn't just like you're thinking, okay, well, in movies of this type they tend to do this, and so I should probably have a this happens, whether or not you're writing a film script, or I want to write in the style of so and so, or it doesn't mean you shouldn't do that for practice, but with a lot of doing a lot of your own writing, getting feedback from people, getting positive reinforcement when you are doing things that's different from a lot of the other stuff you might have read, that can be very powerful. And going through that depression and anxiety, in 2020, when it was at its worst, in the spring there, that brought a depth to my writing, especially poetry, because I was able to connect more to much deeper feelings, and they're not necessarily all feelings about being depressed or anxious.
No.
But being able to write from a deeper level, I guess.
Okay. I've said in the past that I feel bad for people who've never had anything bad happen to them
Yes.
because everything is so surface and so shallow.
Oh, and
So
writers who've never had, you know, bad things happen to them tend to
yeah,
be pretty bland.
well,
So
yeah.
their work, I mean, I don't know about the personality, they may be very nice.
Well, I evoked the name of a famous writer a few minutes ago, and I don't want to get sued. Not that he'll ever see it, but um, he tends to write the same story over and over and over.
Well, and a lot of them do because they're successful and that's what their publisher wants.
Right,
It's what their
right.
readers want. Yeah.
And I've quit reading his writing because it is just the same story over and over and over. One of his books I have found different than everything else he has written,
Mm.
and it was an excellent book. So I would highly recommend getting the audio book of uh, Sully. So Sully, and the audio book in particular because
Is that the same story as the movie, like The Man Who Landed the Plane, or is it completely different?
no, it's a different one. No, this is about a basketball player from Rwanda.
Oh, okay. Oh, we have
And
someone named Kristen Melinda saying howdy, folks, in the comment.
yes, hi, Kristen.
Hi, Kristen.
Nice to see you. Um, no, I in particular enjoy this audiobook because not only is it about Solly, Solly. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Sorry,
So,
not Sully. Anyway, but the voice actor does accents better than anyone I have ever met. And because you and
oh,
I have spoken to people from all over the world. Like
yes.
this man can do regional African accents
Wow.
and perfectly white boy accents, and like just he's amazing. So I would recommend listening to that book.
Okay.
Now, if you were ever to have something of yours read, what sort of um, what sort of feeling would you want to get, or actor or something like that would you want to get to read your writing? Does that make any sense?
Um, well, it would vary a lot. I mean, for the poetry, um, definitely not to be read too fast.
Mm,
And that's one of the mistakes that a lot of, and not just in poetry, but that's one of the mistakes that a lot of people who aren't very experienced in reading their work in public, make, is to go too fast.
mm-hmm.
Because they think, well, if I go too slowly, I'll bore them.
Yeah.
If they look like they're getting bored, slow down. Um, and I've had that advice given to me by people with much more experience, and now I'm passing it on to others. It's true, because usually people are bored because you're not giving them time, unless it's just really, really bad writing.
Right.
Assuming that it's decent writing, people tend to be bored if there aren't enough pauses, especially in the right places, to let them
Mm-hmm.
think and visualize what you're talking about. And in a lot of poetry, especially, you leave some space for the reader or the listener to bring themselves into, so you
Yeah.
don't lay out everything completely, enough to people can follow it and understand, but you leave a few things that people can bring their own interpretation to, or they have to think for a second before they go, oh yeah, that's what that image must mean. And so that is what really engages your listeners, and your readers.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, when people are reading their work, no matter what genre it is, definitely don't go too fast.
That's something else. Like you said, it leaves space. And something that I've heard a lot of other authors talk about, whether they're writing about passion or writing about a monster. Never fill in the gaps because a person's brain is going to fill
Yes,
it in better than you ever can.
yes, And
Right.
that's why people who write suspense, it, and all sorts of things, give the reader something to do, make the reader work, but not too much. You've got, got to give them something. And that they will be so with you and so engaged. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, in
Absolutely.
Jaws, for example, in the movie Jaws, for a long time in the movie, you didn't see the shark at all, but the
Hmm.
music and people's reactions to it and everything, the audience imagined.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's amazing how one cello and two notes can
Yes,
just
yes,
change the way somebody thinks, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And in writing, good word choices um, can give the reader or the listener enough
Yeah.
to then flesh it out more in their own mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, what wisdom would you give um, somebody who has some experience writing but feels stuck, besides developing a mental illness and having a pandemic?
Yeah, because that worked well for me.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, but I don't know if I would recommend giving a pandemic to the entire world to
Oh,
your
yeah.
writing. Uh, um, well, okay, being stuck, sometimes that means you've got writer's block and you
Hmm.
can't get anything written. Being
Hmm.
stuck could also be you're finding yourself writing the same kind of thing all the time, or you can't get out of the patterns you tend to fall back on in your writing. Um, and both of them, I think one of the best things to do is put it aside, go out and do something completely different, like walking by the
Hmm.
river, for example, or go do something where you're not this very different, very active, physically active is great.
Mm.
And often while you're doing that, they thoughts will come to you, ideas will come to you, and whether they do or not, you are, cleansing your mental palate, rinsing out your mouth after you've had one glass of wine, with some water or whatever, and
Yeah.
leaving room for something maybe else that will come. And whether or not you have any ideas while you're out, jogging or walking or playing basketball or taking the kids down on a toboggan down a hill, um,
Hmm.
just having a break physically from where you were working and something very different from the activity of writing can be very, very helpful. And as I've said before, setting stuff aside for a while, if you can, if you don't have a
A
near
tight deadline.
tight deadline, that
Yeah.
can be so much, so beneficial. And I know so many people say, if you're a writer, you must write every day.
Mm.
You don't have to write every day.
Hmm. It's the musts that get me. You
Yeah.
have to, you must, you need to. It's like, dude, back off, back away from the redhead. Trust me, things will happen.
Now, when
Uh,
you're in the zone and you're working on something and you're getting good work done, yes, you should write every day. And
yeah,
sometimes you're not getting good work done, but if I keep pushing through, I feel like I'm in a writing mode, even though it's not great. Then yes, you should write every day. But
right,
there are times when you may not need to write at all, and you want to
right,
do something very completely different that feeds your soul,
right.
but isn't necessarily writing, and that is very valid.
Well, yes. Well, like Kristen said, inspiration fodder. I mean,
Yes, yes,
so you may not be doing what it is you're writing about, but it's something else that physically takes you away, or something that
yes,
just, and it
yes.
just renews you. It's like they say, change is as good as a vacation, or a vacation's as good as a.
Change is as good as a rest,
That's the word I'm looking for.
or change is as good as getting arrested. I know it's one of those.
If you don't have enough change, you'll get arrested.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that could
that's the
be.
one. Yeah. Okay. Um, no, there is something that my brother-in-law does every year, and it's called Novel November, or Novella November, something like that. And he writes a novel in a
Oh,
month.
NaNoWriMo,
Is it NaNoWriMo?
National Novel Writing Month.
Yes. Okay.
NaNoWriMo. Yes.
Okay. So he does that every year. Have you ever taken part in that?
No, I know people who have, but I haven't. No.
Okay. Is it something that would interest you?
Well, I haven't really been that interested in writing a novel. Maybe at some point, but for fiction, short stories definitely, and and other stuff I've talked about. But
Hmm.
maybe at some point I might.
Okay. So what now tell me the difference between a short story, a novel, and literature. I always
Well,
wondered what's the
all of the
difference
things you
between
just
an
mentioned are literature.
okay.
Short, well, okay, there's various definitions of the length of a short story. And there's
Okay.
things like microfiction, flash fiction, can be like, 200 words, 250 words, 300. Shorts, they usually are considered a short story starting at about 1,500 words. Novellas might be, 10,000 words or something, or 30,000. Well, no, more than that, probably like 40,000 or something.
Hmm.
And yeah, so there is no
It's a
fast.
matter of length
Yeah, it's
then.
a matter of length. Yeah.
Okay. And your preference is short story or
Well,
poetry?
actually, I did attend a couple of flash fiction workshops, and so I
Oh,
did some flash fiction, like around 250 words or so. Um, and that was a lot of fun and a good discipline to try something a little different. Um, but in terms of fiction, my preference is short story, and then of course, obviously, I love poetry and plays. But um, yeah, that's another thing. Try a different genre.
okay. So Kristen has a question for you. I love writing one or two people have told me that I'm decent at it, but I don't have any training or anything. Where might someone start to get into it more seriously? And it was discussed earlier on, but that's okay, Kristen. We can talk about it again.
Yes, and one of the best things is to find a writing group, and so just Google writing group in the city or town you're in or near, and often there will be one, and sometimes it's connected to the local library, um, or ask the library if they know of any writing
Hmm.
groups, and some of them are online. I belong to an LA based online writing group that has been so beneficial for me. Just having others out there that are rooting for you and that are, succeeding and failing and having great days and bad days with writing, whether or not you're giving each other feedback about your writing, or just supporting each other, and giving each other information about workshops and conferences and things, that can be so important. And the other thing I was mentioned to Kim is read a lot, especially in the genre that you're most interested in, like short stories or whatever. But read things that are different than that too, because you can get great ideas. For example, when you're reading a novel, you might get inspired for something for a poem, for example, or when you're watching a movie, a screenplay can inspire you for something in a short story, or um, a personal memoir essay, for example. So all sorts of things, cross pollination, can happen. So I can't stress enough reading a lot, and if you can find workshops, again, often through libraries or searching online, they can really help you.
Now, do these writing guilds or these writing groups that you're talking about, are they generally free? Do they generally cost to join?
Uh,
What sort of
some a
commitment?
lot of them are free. Some of them, if they're online, there is some cost just for technical stuff, like a Zoom account and that to run it and things like that.
Hmm.
But generally, there isn't much cost, if any.
Okay, well, that's good. That's good because I'm cheap. I mean, I'm broke. I mean, I don't have a lot of excess cash.
Yeah, and attending workshops and that, like most of them, they're in the early days of the pandemic. There was tons of free stuff, but
Right.
now most of it there is a fee, but there's some that are quite reasonably priced and some that are not. So there's all sorts of, and like I said, I know Saskatoon Public Library, for example, sometimes has really good free online and sometimes in person now as well, back to
Mhm. Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
writing workshops. And the writer in residence, if you are in a town or city or near one that has a writer in residence at the public library, they are wonderful. They can give you so much feedback. I've taken stuff to several writers in residence at the Saskatoon Public Library over the years, and it's been absolutely wonderful. They've been so helpful.
Oh, that is so good. And it's nice when they do have that resource available. You don't
Yes.
have to take a university class. You don't need a Bachelor of Fine Arts.
No. I mean, you can get one if you want, but you don't have to.
Right. Yeah. And that's something that, like, I'm an artist. I painted those.
Yes.
But at the same time, I don't have a fine arts degree. I don't have really any major training. But I look at something and I'm like, okay, this picture, for example, was from a photograph that my chiropractor took on our trip to Hawaii. So it's like, okay, you look at it, it's like, actually, that does look like a sunset in Hawaii.
It does,
but it's
yeah.
just a whole pile of yellow and brown.
Yeah.
So.
And your composition in both of them is excellent.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Doing photography as a hobby, I'm very much into composition. So
it makes all the difference in the world, doesn't it?
Yes.
And it's the same when you're writing a story or doing a poem.
Yes.
How you put it together.
Yeah.
Where you put the action, the distraction, the red herrings or whatever. If it's going to be, I suppose with any story there needs to be at least
herring.
some herring. I'm not Swedish at all, am I? But it's a matter of there needs to be some sort of conflict in almost any type of story. It doesn't need to be like mystery and stuff, but there needs to be at least a push-pull somewhere, right?
And that's one of the things that if you're writing plays or short stories, especially, or screenplays or novels, that you have to, your character has to always want something. And there has to be obstacles to them getting it.
Yeah.
And that will often put them in conflict with other characters, in conflict with a company or situation or the environment, like a storm or something. But yes, there does have to be an element of conflict and like we said, it's not necessarily fighting, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, because if everything is written about everybody getting exactly what they want when they want it, whoa, we'd be yawning.
In life, that would just be so boring. I would yawn to death.
Reading it would go, that's not like life,
No, not at all. Yeah, for sure. So, Kristen, do you have any other questions? Because we would be more than happy to answer whatever you have, whether you've watched the beginning or not.
She said she's going to watch the first part again in the replay.
Yes, she is. Yeah. Yes. We appreciate that.
Yes. I'm also concerned if we're sort of getting too long for your needs.
I normally anywhere between an hour and an hour and 20 is typical for mine. So, but yes, if you'd like, we can wrap up. Was there a third piece you could grace us with, or are you pretty much spent?
Well, okay, I could read something from Wayward and Upward, Stories and Poems. This is a Canadian anthology. And a Canadian musician, an instrumental CD he created. What they did for this book is they chose 3 poems and 1 piece of fiction. They chose multiple poems and pieces of fiction about each track on the album.
Oh.
And each person had a different take on it, but you had to really listen to the music and then get inspired by it and give what you saw as your interpretation. So I was one of the people chosen and published in it. And reading the other people's was so great because I could see, yes, that fits the music, but it's so different from mine.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
This one is called As Night Lifts.
Okay.
I wake from my favorite nightmare. Give up, give up. Rain spits at the bedroom window till a yellow warbler, its wings the brushstrokes of Vincent's sunflowers, scatters clouds with song. Get up, get up, get up. Its mate announces, the rain's over, the sun's out. My head rises from the pillow, leaves a dent, a depression in the shape of dreams. It holds on to them each morning when I go out to pretend I'm someone better, then returns them like a kiss, night's thousand arms wrapped round me. My muscles pull me outside, left foot right, then left, then right. A blue jay squawks, look up, you fool. I feel a beat from the days when my legs and heart were faster and walk, run, dance along the trail. Two yellow warblers soar on their way to touch the sun. If I close my eyes and leap, we'll reach that star together.
That's beautiful.
Thank
That's
you.
a great way to finish off this this episode. Thank you so much for stopping by and having a chat with me.
Always
We have to
wonderful
do
to
it
chat
more.
with you. Yes, yes.
We've spoken in person, I think, never in the last 2 years. So
I know. We have to do something about that.
we do have to do something about that. Now that it's not the pandemic, we don't have to wear masks and all that other
Yes,
stuff.
and we can hug.
Yay!
You know, we're both huggers.
Yes, we are. And if Melissa's around, we'll make her eyes roll.
Yes,
So,
yes.
absolutely. All right. So thank you so much, Dawn. I
Thank you.
really
Thank you.
appreciate you stopping by. This is awesome.
Wonderful talking to you.
Wonderful talking to you too. Thank you so much.
All
And
right.
Kristen,
Take
thanks for
care.
stopping by as well. We'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.